Later, I'll be talking with the author of a book called The Hawk and the Dove about the push and pull during the Cold War. In this case, Paul Nitze and George Kennan. But you get the feeling, to some degree, Benny Schriever and Curtis LeMay were involved in a similar kind of a push and pull.
That's right.
Curtis LeMay, being somebody who believed that bigger was better, he pushed President Eisenhower to build a hydrogen bomb larger than 10 megatons, which 10 megatons is huge.
Well,
what did he think he'd be destroying half of Europe, wouldn't he?
Yes, but he had no consciousness of that. LeMay, like many of the generals of his time, not Schriever, but many of the generals of his time, had no sense of the ecological effects of nuclear weapons. He thought of them as just bigger bombs.
Had he been inured by the fact that he had been involved in some of the more horrific raids on Japan during World War II?
He had been inured to the death of civilians by that, but also World War II had given him this emotional faith in the bomber. And he wanted bigger bombs because the bombing had been inaccurate during World War II, and he wanted to be sure of knocking out his targets. So they had, in fact, 25 megatons programmed from Moscow alone. A megaton is equivalent to 80 Hiroshima bombs. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, which I write about, when John Kennedy saved us from by refusing to let them attack the Soviets, because the Russians had nuclear warheads for their missiles in Cuba and probably would have fired them. LeMay would have turned the whole Strategic Air Command loose with 2,400 megatons. That's 192 Hiroshima bombs. It would have wiped out the whole northern hemisphere.
My guest is Neil Sheehan. His book, A Fiery Peace in a Cold War, Bernard Schriever and the Ultimate Weapon, is published by Random House. You write that Schriever came across as foolish in his first encounter with Curtis LeMay. Why?
Well, he was proposing to build amphibious bombers. It was the only foolish thing he ever proposed. He was proposing to build amphibious bombers so that they could scatter them, so that in the event of a surprise Soviet attack, the Russians
equivalent of putting them on an aircraft carrier,
right?
It?
Well,
but he wanted to have the planes themselves to be amphibious,
and the planes would be amphibious themselves. Therefore, you could scatter them around because we got a lot of rivers, so you could have bases all over the place, and the Russians wouldn't be able to knock them out in. But that was a short-lived thing. It was the only serious, silly thing. Then he got on to something quite serious in building the ICBM.
And nuclear-tipped ballistic missiles.
Right, because you only had in those days 15 minutes warning of an incoming ICBM. And there was no way to stop it. There still is no way to stop it. And had the Russians acquired a fleet of these things, they would have undercut the credibility of the airplane as the nuclear deterrent. And you would have gotten, quite possibly, adventurism by Soviet leaders, which would have triggered nuclear war. Schriever saw this and realized that you had to create a stable situation. So by creating a nuclear stalemate in which neither side could destroy the other, without, in other words, you couldn't have what Eisenhower feared, a nuclear Pearl Harbor. The Russians couldn't get away with it, neither could we. So they'd have to live in peace.
So Schriever, the guy who gave us MAD, mutually assured destruction?
That's right, yeah. The building of the intercontinental ballistic missile gave us MAD, mutual assured destruction, which isn't MAD at all. It's peace.